namely the ins and outs of ADHD and dyslexia and the various procedures, wonderful procedures we have to help with those. I thought I would say a few words about those right now, but then go off on a more general discussion of childhood, because after all, we were talking about children. My comments on ADHD and dyslexia from the widest perspective, first of all, to tell you I have both of those conditions, both ADHD and dyslexia, and I would not trade either one of them for the world. They give me what makes me different in a wonderful way. I am indeed different. There were times in my life when I wished I could be Joe Normal. That was a foolish wish, and I'm very glad I didn't succeed in doing it, because what has allowed me to make the contributions I've made to the world are by developing my gifts, not by remediating the issues that dyslexia and ADD cause. To this day, I am a painfully slow reader. That's dyslexia. Boiled down, dyslexia means you're slow to read and spell your native language. I'm actually an excellent speller, but I'm a terribly slow, not a bad reader, but unbelievably slow reader. I'm such a slow reader, my wife says, I don't know how you know anything. But I did major in English at Harvard College while doing pre-med, and I had to be able to read to do that. I graduated with high honors, and I've written 21 books, and I'm hard at work on numbers 22 and 23. So this is something you should know about these conditions. Doesn't get stressed nearly enough, that they are markers of talent. Do they carry with them problems? You bet. And the prisons and the halls of the addicted and the unemployed are filled with people who have ADHD, dyslexia, and other quirks and differences. But so are the halls of the major contributors to civilization. I'm sure whoever invented the wheel had probably both ADD and dyslexia. Those of you who have boys, I'm sure have heard of Dave Pilkey, who wrote the Captain Underpants series, writes the Captain Underpants series. He's become a friend of mine, and he has big time ADHD and dyslexia. The man who invented the PCR test that we use for COVID, I don't know how many of you know what PCR stands for. It stands for polymerase chain reaction. He's in heaven now, but he had big time ADD, and he won the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1993 for that huge discovery, thought of as right up there with the double helix in importance in discoveries in biology and chemistry. I could go on, but I want you to know it's not poppycock. It's not Hallmark cards. It's not blowing smoke. When I talk about the genius of so many people who have these conditions that are so poorly understood, both dyslexia and ADHD, when parents are given the news that their child has it, do they go out and dance in the streets? No, but they should, you see. And because what these conditions confer can't be bought and can't be taught. And what they detract, we can make up for in schools like yours, with various interventions that are, when I was growing up, the only intervention we had was try harder. Well, that didn't help too much. But now we have such wonderful interventions that we can pretty much make up for the downside of these conditions. But the upside, that's the part most people don't know about, and you can't buy it, and you can't teach it. And what is the upside that is associated with ADHD and dyslexia, and leads me to call them gifts that are hard to unwrap? Well, the upside is creativity, is ingenuity, is the ability to dream big dreams and pursue them, is tenacity, is intuition, is big-heartedness, but also strong-willedness to the point of being stubborn, is a zany sense of humor, is an ability to identify with the underdog, empathy, and help that person. And the list could go on and on. Let me just wrap this point up by referring you to the Core Triad. By the way, can you all hear me? I know I'm not talking loud. Yes?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dr. Hallowell.
Oh, good.
You're doing great.
Okay, good. The Core Triad of symptoms that define ADHD in the DSM, the diagnostic manual, that is used internationally as for research purposes, as the working definition of this condition. The Core Triad are inattention or distractibility, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. And then there are clusters of symptoms of inattention and another cluster of symptoms of impulsivity and hyperactivity. And if you have 6 out of 9 on either of those axes, you qualify for the diagnosis. Well, think for a minute. What is distractibility? But sort of the negative flip side of curiosity. And curiosity is an incredibly powerful positive to have in life. It's what really drives unexpected discoveries. When Fleming noticed the petri dish didn't look the same, it's because he was being curious. He probably was distracted from something someone was talking to him about when he glanced over at the petri dish and saw it look different. When we look away, it doesn't mean that we don't like the person who's talking, or we don't like what's being said, or that we are looking away on purpose. In fact, quite the contrary. We're usually looking away inadvertently. And that's at the heart of what distractibility is all about. Well, it's being driven by curiosity. What's that noise? What's that sound? What's under that covering? What's behind that wall? And that mind, the curious mind, is at the heart and soul of all great discoveries. So we want to applaud and encourage curiosity. And as we help people with their tendency to be distractible, we want to be careful that we don't stomp on their desire to be curious, because you can scare the curiosity out of a kid. If you punish them, humiliate them one too many times, they'll start giving up, and they won't continue to be curious. Okay, number 2, the cluster of symptoms under the heading of impulsivity and hyperactivity. Think about it for a minute. What is creativity? What is creativity but impulsivity gone right? See, you don't plan to have a new idea. You don't plan to be creative. You don't say it's 4 p.m. time for my new idea and lay it like an egg. No, creativity comes unbidden. New ideas, brilliant insights come unbidden, spontaneously, impulsively. Creativity depends upon disinhibition. Kerry Mullis, in his autobiography, wrote a description of when he discovered the PCR reaction, and he was sitting looking at a Los Angeles sunset, and it just came into his mind, along with the vista of the sun. He started seeing this new idea take shape. And you can read his autobiography and read about it. It's absolutely fascinating. And in 15 minutes, he'd put it all together. He couldn't wait to get back to the lab. And he said he knew in those 15 minutes, he'd won a Nobel Prize. And he was absolutely right. And his discovery ranks right up there with the double helix in terms of important discoveries in biology. But that wouldn't have happened had his mind not had the capacity to let go of control, to admit alien objects, to let the unthought, the unacceptable, the seemingly irrelevant, chaotic, messy, unformed, you name it, all of that stuff that we are encouraged to exclude and censor out. If you don't let that in, new ideas won't happen. You know, a critic in the 18th century, 19th century said, he who imitates the divine Iliad does not imitate Homer. In other words, original thinking has no it may have a catalyst, it may have a spur, it may have a resemblance to something else, but it is not an imitation, it is an original. And that depends upon what we call impulsivity, disparagingly. Remember, when your child is being impulsive and driving you crazy, that is creativity, the flip side anyway of creativity. And the third element in that triad, distractibility, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Third element, hyperactivity. You get to be my age, it's called energy. I'm really glad I have this little turbo pack that has me talking to you now. I'm really glad that I'm on a mission to try to, explain to this world that this misunderstood condition, and how if you manage it right, indeed it can be a gift. I don't deny for a second that if you don't know how to manage it, it can be a curse, a lifelong curse. It can shorten your life. It can lead you into very dark places. But if you do know you have it, and you do know what to do about it, as you all do, the sky's the limit. Getting there may be tough. Believe me, my wife Sue and I have raised 3 kids with ADD, and now they're all thriving. But believe me, there were times when they absolutely were not. And my wife looked at me and said, why couldn't we have had simple kids? Well, I said, you can blame me for that. I have the genes, but at the same time now, we're seeing the beauty of it all, as will you. And I give the same advice to you I gave to the faculty. Never worry alone. When you have a concern, don't hide. Don't go into isolation. When you worry alone, that's when bad things happen. That's when you globalize and catastrophize and make bad decisions and alienate people and think ill of yourself and the world. Never worry alone. Really good advice. The minute you worry with someone, the worry turns into problem solving. All right, let me now talk a little bit about childhood. Where was I? I want to talk to you about childhood. Of all the books I've written, my favorite one is called The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness. It has nothing to do with ADD, but it does in that it puts forth my idea of how to raise children in such a way that you will maximize the chances of their turning out the way you want them to turn out. And we all want basically the same thing for our kids. We want them to grow up to be happy. That's usually the first word that comes to mind. But good, decent, moral, upstanding, reliable, contributing citizens. We all have the same goals, that they make the best of their talents, that they do so in an honest way, and that they care about others and they serve some greater mission. I bet everybody sitting in the audience today shares that. But then ask, what is your plan to get there? And that's where people would start differing, if they even have an opinion at all. A lot of times you're operating on a game plan that you're not even aware of. But if you're not careful, what you'll do is you'll drift into the pyramid model, or what I call the great Harvard fallacy. And the notion is that the closest you are to the top of whatever you're in, the closest you are to the top of the pyramid, the greater your success of reaching the kind of life we all want for our children. And so you find pretty crazy stuff happening. I in pursuit of that top of the pyramid. I have an office in New York City, and so I've gotten to know the various private schools in Manhattan. And there is a tutoring agency that has also gotten to know these schools and the teachers and the exams, and he can pretty much guarantee, if you're, say, getting a B+ at Brearley or Collegiate or Dalton, that you can get an A, thereby increasing your chances of getting into heaven, otherwise known as Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, or Stanford, I suppose. But first of all, that's a notion rooted in no evidence. And second of all, make a wild guess what this man charges per hour for his services. Per hour. $1,500. $1,500 an hour. And he has a waiting list around the block. A completely counterproductive, unnecessary service, rooted in parents' disposable income, I suppose, but also their intense anxiety. And most of all, their lack of knowledge. That's not what works. So let me tell you what does work. What does work is what I call the cycle of excellence, and it begins with connection. It begins with love. It begins with creating an environment where a child never feels alone, where a child always feels connected, even if he can't articulate it. He feels it in his bones or her bones. It's pre-verbal. It's a sense of, when you wake up in the morning, you go to bed at night, a sense that you don't even have to say it because it's with you. It's in your blood. I am not alone. I am loved. I matter. What I do counts. I belong. I'm not just accepted. I'm appreciated. And you feel that most intensely in your family, but then that spreads out. And for a child, the equivalent of a job is going to school. So feeling connected at school is incredibly important. Now, we're living in a unique time. We're living in a time of bountiful advantages, incredible abundance. But also, we're living in an era of disconnection. And I date its beginning with Columbine and 9/11. Unique events. Columbine, you all remember how you felt if you were around at the time? I know as a parent and a psychiatrist, I was aghast. I couldn't believe that a student would come to school and murder other students. I was stupefied and left. And my friend Michael Thompson, who at the time came out with a book about boys, it was good timing. He and I both said to him, "Where did this come from?" Well, now it happens so often that we don't scratch our heads. It's a commonplace occurrence, you know, and it's always born out of disconnection. All the problems we see in childhood now, from substance use to gangs to crime to depression to anxiety, you name it, it comes from feeling disconnected, from not feeling intimately involved, connected, a member, not feeling belonging, a feeling on the outs. And if we would take, and by the way, I won't get into it all because I want to have time for other stuff, but there are studies that prove what I'm saying, this disconnection. And one of the great findings is the predicting factors of which children will get into trouble and which children will stay out are not the demographics, not family income, not IQ, not region of the country, not religion, not gender, none of that. None of the objectives tell the story. The two most discriminating factors in predicting which kids will thrive and which kids won't. Number one, does the child report that he or she feels connected at home? And connected was the word they used in the interview. It didn't matter who lived at home. You could be raised by a single parent. You could be raised by two men, two women. You could be raised by grandma. You could be raised, passed around the neighborhood. It didn't matter who lived at home. What mattered was how you felt at home. And if you felt that you belonged, that you were loved, that you were cared about, you were protected. And the second most discriminating factor had nothing to do with any of the objectives you might think of. It had to do with, did you feel connected at school? Your grades didn't matter. Your rank in the class didn't matter. Your popularity didn't matter. It was, did you feel, and if the kid said, what do you mean by connected? Do you feel welcomed? Do you feel treated fairly? And do you have at least one good friend? And is there something you're looking forward to when you get there, even if it's just recess or lunch? If you felt connected at home and you felt connected at school, you were safe, you were protected. The statistics were it was very unlikely that you would get into trouble, that you would fail, that you would, get into drugs, that you would get pregnant when you didn't want to, that, all the things we hope don't happen in childhood. If we would take as seriously connectedness scores, which are not hard to measure, I mean, ask any teacher, who are the disconnected kids, and they'll tell you. If we would take as seriously connectedness scores as we take reading, math, and science scores, we'd be a whole lot better off, because it's a lot easier, by the way, to raise connectedness scores than it is to raise reading, math, and science scores. And guess what? The payoff is tremendous. There are lots of people out there who have led fantastic lives, who were terrible students. But I can tell you there aren't many out there who feel disconnected. Disconnection breaks you, breaks your will, breaks your resolve, breaks your ability and desire to participate, to grow, and create. Take connection really seriously is my strong advice, and make sure your child, it doesn't have to be popular, but make sure your child feels welcomed, involved, and has some autonomy, has some agency, whatever the buzzword is for feeling like you're allowed to, you're encouraged to, you may act independently, to start a business or invent something or build a boat or design a dress or whatever it might happen to be. That sort of thing it really matters. And that leads me to step 2 in this cycle of excellence, which is to play. The connected child naturally moves to play. And by play, I don't mean just what you do at recess, although that is certainly play. By play, I mean something much more profound. By play, I mean any activity in which your imagination lights up. Any activity in which your imagination lights up. That's my definition of play. The opposite of play is doing exactly what you're told. Robotic behavior. And I spent a number of years consulting to the Harvard chemistry department, an amazing department, 5 Nobel Prize winners there. And every year, a crop of new postdocs and graduate students arrive in Cambridge. And the mandate is go into the lab and discover new knowledge. And one group runs into the lab jubilant at the chance to mix chemicals and use Harvard's resources and, blow up the building or whatever. The other group freezes up. They stop dead in their tracks. And they say, you got to tell me what to do. I'll do anything you want. I'll stay up all night, run your experiments, grade your papers, teach your courses. I'll do anything you want, but you have to tell me what to do. And this is the group that back around 4th or 5th grade got the message that if you want to excel in life, do what you're told. And this group did that very well, to the point of reaching the pinnacle in their field and being admitted to the graduate study at Harvard chemistry. But it is not what turns out contributors to civilization. It is people who did not learn to do what they're told, or if they did, they also retained their capacity to go off the reservation, to play, to imagine what might be, and that capacity of mind, that's what we have, we people with ADD. What defines us and separates us from the rest is our imagination. Now, it can be a blessing or a curse. And in another presentation, I could tell you how to manage it so it's not a curse. But don't let it atrophy. And the way you don't let it atrophy as a teacher or a parent is you always encourage engagement of the imagination. The easiest way to do that is to ask a question. The way to shut it off is to give an instruction. Do this, do that, do this, do that. No imagination involved in that. But a question, particularly an open-ended question that doesn't have a right or wrong answer, that invites the imagination. And my goodness, once you get in the habit of using your imagination, you never stop. Play, that's what childhood ought to be about. It's what school ought to be about. I went back to my old high school, Exeter, and gave a talk not long ago. And I said, I know you all think you're here to get into some name college. But that's not why you're here. At least it's not why you should be here. And it's not what's worth the tuition you're paying. What's worth the tuition you're paying and what you should be doing here, and mind you, these kids are I'm older than your kids, but what you should be doing here is falling in love. And I don't mean just a romance with a person. That could be, that's wonderful, but a romance with a subject, with a book, with a period in history, with a painting, with a musician, with an author, with the sky, with a star, with a blade of grass. If you fall in love during your growing up years, that sustains you, you see. Getting top grades does not sustain you. It may allow you to move to the next step of the rung of the ladder that you're climbing, which is fine. I'm not saying don't climb ladders, but I'm saying what will sustain you, feed you, carry you for the rest of your life in a way that will make you glad to be alive, instead of just having been a good boy or girl and done what you were told. Glad to be alive, glad to contribute, is that experience of having fallen in love. I fell in love with writing when I was at Exeter, and I've been doing it ever since. But I also was practical, and I knew I needed to find a way of making a living. So I went to medical school, and you put those two together and you have my unusual career. I wouldn't have done that had I not been encouraged to think outside the box. But it all began with falling in love. And that's why it's so important for your kids, particularly pre-high school years, to play, to find doing what does my imagination light up? Doing what? And you want your environment, and in this case, the school and the home, to foster play. Do you want to have images all over the place, pictures, drawings, sculptures? You want to have the walls covered with stuff that will engage the imagination. You don't want to have a stark antiseptic institutional feel. You want to have a rich, vibrant, always in motion, full of the unexpected. You could go around a corner and what do you see? Something you didn't think you would. That is the kind of environment that stokes play, that stokes the imagination. And you want to reward kids when they come out with offbeat, wacko, zany answers. Don't ridicule that. Say, well, how unusual, that answer is. Can you tell us where it came from? And by the way, the honest answer to those kind of questions is usually, I don't know. We ADDers and dyslexics, we live in the world of I don't know. Where am I going? I don't know. Where have I been? I don't know. What do I hope? Where do I hope to go? I don't know. We live in the world of I don't know. But those I don't knows, as long as they're not punished or humiliated, turn into wonderful places. And that's what we do. I mean, I don't know how I wrote the books I wrote. I truly don't, but I did. And they came out of this mysterious bin called my imagination. And you all, with these children that you're raising, teaching, living with, putting up with, they are hotbeds of imagination. So you want to make sure you give them an outlet for that. Yes, you need to organize it. Yes, you want to involve them in the various systematic courses of instruction that you've set up. But more important is that you encourage play, that you encourage the free play of the mind, that you encourage them to disagree, that you encourage them to stick up for the underdog, that you encourage them to play devil's advocate, that you encourage them to go off on tangents. Of course, you have to bring them back. Of course, in a classroom, you have to, you have to do certain things. But that shouldn't be your top priority, should not be obedience at all. In fact, you want to encourage a questioning mind. A questioning mind does not mean a disobedient mind, and it doesn't mean a mind that has trouble with authority. It just means a mind that allows itself to say, but what about this? Or what about that? And if we didn't have the what abouts, we'd still think the world was flat, or that the Earth was at the center of the solar system. Progress depends upon saying, well, are you sure about that? Or how do you know? And not blindly receiving knowledge as if it were already proven and spoken for. Okay, the child who has an active imagination, who knows how to play, naturally goes to step 3, which is practice. You find something you like to play, and so you do it over and over again. Maybe it's mixing chemicals. Maybe it's a musical instrument. Maybe it's, in my case, writing, or maybe it's someone else's case, weightlifting. But when you find a kind of play that excites you, you want to practice. You want to endure the pain of practice, because it's in the service of playing. It's in the service of this use of the imagination that is intrinsically enjoyable. You're not doing it for a prize, although you'll be glad to get a prize if you get one. But you're doing it because you love the game, and that's the key to life. Okay, then practice leads to step 4, which is progress. making progress at any activity that meets two criteria: has to be difficult and has to matter to you. If you, and this applies to everybody, if you make progress at something that's difficult and matters to you, I guarantee two elements that we are so concerned about in children: confidence and motivation increase. If you set up a child to make progress at something, anything that is difficult and matters to him, and he makes that progress, his confidence and self-esteem will grow without doubt. Now, it's dicey because it works both ways. If try as he might, he makes no progress, then it cuts the other way. He loses confidence and his self-esteem suffers. That's why teachers, parents, coaches, grandmas, the Holy Ghost, that's why they're so important to intervene at the moment of struggle, when the self-esteem hangs in the balance, when they're trying, and they can't do it. That's when you need the intervention of whoever it might be, parent, teacher. And then as you make progress, you get step 5, which is recognition. Other people notice. Doesn't mean you win a prize. You might, but you might not. But someone you care about notices. A classmate, a teammate, mom, dad, school head, whatever. Somebody notices. That consolidates the confidence and self-esteem that the making of progress laid down. But also, and a lot of people don't think about this, it is also the root of moral behavior, because that recognition ties you to the group recognizing you. School, family, team, what have you. And when you feel tied into that, when you feel part of the fabric of it, when you feel ownership of it, if you will, you don't want to steal from it. You don't want to backbite it. You don't want to vandalize it. You don't want to cheat off of it. And you're doing good, doing right, not because you're afraid of punishment or because you've memorized the 10 Commandments or what have you. You're doing right because you want to. You naturally want to. It's not rule-driven behavior so much as it is connectedness-driven behavior. Out of your connection to the larger group emerges what we call moral behavior. And that is the most sustainable of any, because it's born out of desire to do just that. I don't want to rip off this school because I love this place, because it loves me, and it's a marvelous love affair that you can get going with an institution. And really, programs in moral behavior, when you drill down, you discover they're really programs in connection, because it is the disconnected kids who do the immoral deeds. And the way to them is not to punish them, but it is to connect them, to bring them back into the fold. Well, there you have a 5-step plan that maximizes the chances that a child will grow up to be the person we all hope and pray our children will grow up to become. Throw away your $1,500 an hour tutors. Not only do you not need them, they're bad for you, but embrace this force that is free, that is infinite in supply, and that is actually fun, called connection. And then live in that cycle of excellence that I just outlined every day, in every way that you can. Well, let me stop there. I hope I've made sense. And really what I've offered to you is the product of many years of research and raising children and living around schools and families.
Thank you, Dr. Hallowell. Thank you very much. We have a couple minutes for questions. So what I'd like to do is I'll ask folks here if they have questions and then repeat them to you. And then we could get some that are in the chat as well. Okay. Anyone here have any questions?
Did you enjoy it? Good. Do we have questions in the chat? I can't see the chat.
No, there are no questions in the chat either.
Oh, wow.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, well, there's nothing. And folks that are virtual, if you have questions, please type them in now. We have, again, about 10, 15 minutes left with Dr. Hallowell.
Don't ask me about the Red Sox. You guys have got the market cornered with the Astros. My gosh. You're going to win.
Well, we had an Astros t-shirt ready for you here. We'll have to send it to you.
Well, yeah, I think you're going to win the World Series. My gosh. It's pretty impressive.
Okay, I have a question here. How do we help our impulsive middle schoolers slow down so they can do their best work?
Well, I was talking earlier, my model for ADD is you've got a Ferrari for a brain with bicycle brakes. And that really is ADD, race car brain with bicycle brakes. And so the process of unwrapping the gift, as I like to say, is a process of strengthening the brakes. And there are many ways of doing that. And what you need is a many-way approach. You need a multimodal approach. The obvious: get enough sleep, eat right, exercise, exercise, exercise. And I know your head, David, is a wise man because he believes in the power of exercise. But it's not a belief, it's a proven fact. My friend and dear friend and colleague, John Rady, wrote a whole book about it called Spark, the revolutionary new science of exercise and the brain. And John just brought out all the science. It's a proven fact now that, physical exercise is one of the very best things you can do for your brain power. And specifically in the world of ADD, the specific kind of exercise, cerebellar stimulation. And that's in chapter 3 of my book, ADHD 2.0. By stimulating the cerebellum, which is the seat of balance, it's at the back of your brain. It's a little clump of neurons, only 10% of brain volume. But get this, it has 75% of the neurons in your brain. So it is hugely important, much more than we knew when I was in medical school. And by stimulating the cerebellum through exercises that challenge a balance, you can fire up the frontal lobes where all the action happens in ADD, and you get improved attention, but also improved emotional control, which means reduction in impulsivity, the bad kind of impulsivity, not the creativity impulsivity, but the bad kind of impulsivity. So any exercise that stimulates balance is really good for that. Read chapter 3 and 2.0. Structure helps reduce impulsivity. If you know the schedule, if you know the rules, connection reduces impulsivity. If you like your friends, if you like the teacher, if you like your community, you're going to be less impulsive. And then finally, there is medication, which people are afraid of, but they shouldn't be. Medication, when it works, is a godsend. It makes everything else easier. And it works about 80% of the time. And by work, I mean, you get target symptom improvement with no side effects other than appetite suppression without unwanted weight loss. You usually do get some appetite suppression, but when it works like eyeglasses. You suddenly can see clearly. Or it works like brakes on your Ferrari brain. It doesn't shut it down, but it allows you to control it. And that's the big issue in success with ADD, is learning to control the power of your brain.
Dr. Hallowell, is there a link between perfectionism and ADHD, and how do you help students who struggle with perfectionism?
Oh, there is definitely a link, and more common in girls than in boys, but boys too. And it's born really out of our fear of the opposite, our fear of disaster. And we magically equate one mistake with obliteration. We equate one mistake with abject failure. So the 8th grade girl who comes home in tears, and mom says, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I got a 99 on this exam, and it's because I forgot the capital of Kansas." And the mom said, "Sweetheart, that's a common mistake, but you got a 99. She said, yes, that's the whole point. I should have gotten 100. And in her mind, 1 point short of perfection is equivalent to failure. And failure is equivalent to disaster, to being the loss of love, to the loss of identity, to the loss of belonging, So what you need to work on is that very tenuous sense of security. You can't talk her out of the perfectionism. Believe me, I've spent many hours trying. They're absolutely tied to that. It makes no sense. And like things that make no sense, you can't talk them out of it. She's convinced that her ticket to whatever she wants in life is via perfection, which is, of course, impossible. That she'll discover that one way or another. But if you want to get at the root cause, don't go after the symptom, which is perfectionism, the very irrational and very destructive and very painful symptom of perfectionism. Go in at the level of basic security. And don't even talk about the grades. Say, I'm sorry you feel so upset. Someday that kind of stuff won't bother you so much. But then in other words, don't make any don't allow her making a big deal of it. Make a big deal of it to you. But instead, go in at the level of security. And you don't have to do it right then because she'll link the two. But just be aware that this girl feels really insecure about something somewhere. And that's where you need to help her. Is it about her appearance? Is it about her family background? Is it about her native intelligence? Is it because she's ashamed of part of her physical attributes? I mean, or all of the above. Young girls and boys too, for that matter, have some major distortions about how the rest of the world sees them. And they often think that the rest of the world thinks they're just a tub of nothingness and just useless or worse. And so, again, you can't argue them out of that, but you can take steps to bolster their sense of security, belonging, importance by involving them. And now you don't want to involve them in too much because then they'll take their perfectionism wherever they go, and it's sort of setting them up for disappointment. But I hope that you get what I'm saying, that this is a common problem in people with ADD, but you can't meet it head on. You got to meet it indirectly. They won't be talked out of. It's like dealing with someone who's anorectic and saying, what, you think you're fat? You're thin as a board. Don't tell me that, I can show you my fat. And you don't get any mileage out of that. You have to come in the back door. But remember, like all of this stuff, it is a marker of talent. And just think, because I don't want you to leave today without knowing this. Think of the really talented people you know, the creative, original, interesting, talented people. I'll bet you almost every single one of them has one of these conditions, whether it's ADHD or dyslexia or depression or anxiety or substance abuse or trauma or bipolar disorder or several of the above. When God hands out talent, he does a little trick and he sticks in a little challenge to go with it, lest you feel, too important. You got this challenge you got to deal with. And it's why it's so important that we get rid of stigma, because the biggest reason, and people still don't access help that they could. And the reason they don't is they feel ashamed. They're afraid that other people will laugh at them. They're afraid that they'll lose respect. And here I am trumpeting for all to hear that I've got ADD and dyslexia and my family was unstable. And, I just go down the list and I'm proud of it, to tell you the truth, but I couldn't be useful in this world if I was perpetually trying to hide everything. I'd put all my effort into that. And that's just a shame. One of the great things about how identity and gender and all that is opening up so much. When I was growing up, if you were gay, you were a suicide risk because the stigma was such that you just didn't dare tell anyone about it. Well, we've come a long way now. but we haven't yet when it comes to mental differences. We still have stigma hovering over mental differences. And by the time I die, I want people to wish they had ADD. Not only not feel ashamed of it, but feel proud of it. Because we are the difference makers. We are the people who come up with the ways of tackling the big problems. I really hope you buy into what I'm saying, because what I'm telling you is true. And the way to help people with, like this little girl, I assume it's a girl who has the habit of perfectionism, or to help the man who can't get past procrastination, or to help the student who's terrified to raise his or her hand in class, is by getting rid of stigma, by embracing difference, by having a day in the classroom where everyone goes around the room and says what they're good at and what they're bad at. And you get a description of the incredible variety of brains that are represented in every classroom. It's not the hierarchy of smart and stupid anymore. At least it shouldn't be. It is all about difference, because that's reality. It's not a philosophical belief. I'm not saying we should embrace difference. We live amid difference, okay? So let's first of all see it, identify it, and then celebrate it. And that means letting each person develop their particular talent, and at the same time, not ridiculing their particular weakness. I'm going on too long here, but it's so important to me, as I guess you can tell.
We really appreciate hearing you and listening to you, and want to thank you for bearing through your pain and being with us here today, and sharing your spirit and your message of connectedness. We all, I'm sure, learned a lot today from you and your words. So thank you very much, Dr. Hallowell. I know the crowd will thank you as well.
Thank you all. Thank you, David. Be well. Take care.
Hey, go Astros.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Hallowell.